We recording?
Yes.
Does the red light mean record?
No,
I thought red lights meant stop.
they do. You should stop.
Howdy, we're at one of our training facilities today. We're not at the range, but out here there's no telling what kind of noises you might have to put up with in the background. We have exclusive access to this piece of land. We can hunt here or hike or camp here or whatever. But anyway, I thought we'd go over some tips for deer hunting because it's deer season right now, although we're coming to the end of it. Uncle Paul gave, I think, a total of 10 tips for deer hunting in 2 different videos. And there were 4 that he didn't cover that I thought were worth covering. So let's talk about some of those. First one I want to mention is time of day when you should hunt deer. Obviously, most places in the U.S. it's illegal to hunt deer at night, so only about sunup to sundown. There are a few exceptions, I think, but not in the state in which I live. I don't think it's legal to hunt deer at all in my state, but I understand in some other states they do hunt at night. And it's apparently very common in Europe to hunt them at night, but I don't know. I've never hunted there. We do hunt raccoons at night and maybe a few other species, but not typically deer. Some people hunt wild pigs at night, that sort of thing. But if you're confined to sunup to sundown, some people will tell you, well, there's a time early in the morning it's good to kill deer and or in the evening, and then some people will tell you you need to be on stand all day. If you're not out all day, you're going to miss opportunities. Well, I spend a lot of time deer hunting. Maybe not as much as I should, and certainly not as much as Paul, but I can tell you that around here, I don't know about other parts of the country, but around here, there's a sort of window of opportunity in the morning when that's just prime time for deer hunting. And I don't see deer moving around a lot at other times of the day very much. I have seen them at every time of the day. So it is possible. If you want every chance you can get to kill a deer, you really should be out all day. But if you want to have the greatest chance, get the most bang for your buck, as it were, not spend many, many hours in the woods, just never seeing any deer at all. Early in the morning, or I'm going to say in the morning, is the best time of day. I have had some luck in the evening. I've had some luck like 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, but the morning is when I've killed the vast majority of the deer, seen the vast majority of the deer that I've seen. A lot of people like to hunt out over a pasture, a food plot, some open piece of land where they can see a long way and they can see any deer that come out there to feed. And that's not a bad way of doing it. I've killed deer in places like that. My grandfather liked to hunt that way. But I discovered a long time ago that while I can see the deer that are present there, number one, I don't see as many of them as I do when I get up into the woods. That open country just doesn't seem to have as many deer in it. And number two, the deer that come out are not the ones that I'm looking for. If we have antler restrictions, the ones that I see come out in the pasture are almost always the ones that don't have enough points on their antlers to be legal. Or if it's a buck only season, I only see does out in the pasture, or I see them too far away. I'll go out during archery season, and yeah, I can look out over the pasture, and there are times a day when I see some deer, but they're 100, 200 yards away. If I were Robin Hood, that would not be a problem, but I'm not. I'm not much of an archer, so I have to get very, very close. Even with a rifle, that's a long way for me. I'm not a long-range rifleman by any means. So I need to get fairly close to deer, and I need to be in a place where I can see them, and I need to be in a place where I can see legal deer. And the pasture has not, or food plots, any open land has not been really productive for me in that way. I need to get up in the woods where it's thick and the deer feel safe and they move around. And of course, you need to have some prediction of where they're going to be in the woods, because the places where I hunt, often you can only see 30 or 40 yards. That's about it. The vegetation's pretty thick. We do have neighbors who will cut shooting lanes, and when you go walk across their land through the woods, from out in the pasture, you look up on the ridge and you say, oh, well, those woods look as thick as any other, but when you get up there, they've cut out all the underbrush, and you can just about drive your car between the trees. It's amazing how open it is there. And that's the way they like to hunt, but I don't do that. I don't know if it's because I'm lazy and I don't want to go and cut all that underbrush. It always felt like cheating, though, I'll say that. I hunt in a place where there's lots of brush, and if you don't get within about 30 yards of a deer, you probably don't get a shot at it. or you might even see them moving 30, 40 yards away and never really get a clear shot because there's just so much brush. And I just chalk that up to part of the challenge of the hunt. I guess it hasn't cost me a lot of deer over the years, maybe a few. But yeah, so I go up and hunt up on the ridges where there are thick woods, but I still need to predict where the deer are going to show up, and I find trails. And if you can find yourself a game trail, deer are lazy, and they'll follow the same trails over and over. And most of the animals, I've seen all kinds of animals on those trails, not just deer. I see bobcats, I see coyotes, I see wild pigs, all kinds of animals following the same trails. And they follow the same trails predictably, sort of day after day. And often there'll be a trail that runs along a fence. A deer can hop over or climb or crawl under, but they're lazy, and it's easier just to follow along the fence than to cross it. So frequently they do. And there are places where there are draws where it's just easier to walk. Deer will find the easiest place to walk usually, and they'll just walk that path. When you find a trail, you can be pretty sure that local deer are using it. And one of my favorite places to hunt on my family's land is a place where there are about 3 trails that all converge. They all cross each other, really close to each other. And I just sit on the ground. Well, actually, I'm getting old now. I usually sit on a milk crate or something instead of on the ground. But I'll be at the base of a tree, and I'll just lean back, and I'll put up a little blind to hides at least the lower half of my body, and just sit there and wait for a deer to come by. And from that spot, I can watch a couple more trails that pass close by, and I've killed a bunch of deer sitting on that spot. I don't usually hunt out of a tree stand. It's a great way to hunt. It's a great way that a lot of people do it. I just don't do it. It's not my thing. But yeah, I would recommend go find some trails in some thick woods, because that's where the deer move around a lot. And they may not come out in the open pasture in the daytime where you can shoot them, but you can get up there and where you watch a trail, and deer will come by eventually. Just sit very still. Actually, I'm going to give you this wasn't on my list before, but I'm going to give you a bonus tip. So many people will talk about scent control, and some people will sort of say, oh, that doesn't matter, you don't need to worry about your scent. I have used scent control products, washing my clothes in scent-free detergent, showering in scent-free soap before I go on a hunt, using scent-free deodorant, what have you, spraying myself down with cover scents like a fresh earth. It just smells like dirt, cover scent. And I've hunted without that. I've hunted, I just shower with ivory soap and wash in regular detergent and go on hunting. And I will tell you the correlation. I can't prove that, the one led to the other, but the correlation has been, I see a lot more deer when I work to control my scent, and those products aren't even expensive. You go to a store for a few dollars, you get a bottle of scent-free detergent that will last you for years. Boy, it'll last you a long time. You don't necessarily need special scent blocking clothing. It's nice, it helps, but I don't know that it makes a huge difference. Wash my hair in scent-free soap before I go on a hunt. Get up early in the morning and just take a shower. And then I spray myself down with that. Again, this is an inexpensive product. A few dollars will buy you a bottle, probably last you all season. Spray yourself down with that. It's just a dirt smell. It's a neutral smell to deer. But it covers up what's left of your human scent. Go up, watch a trail. I'm controlling my scent. I don't worry a whole lot about which way the wind is blowing, although I will say that even with those scent control products, if a deer is downwind, he's not likely to come near me. He's probably going to smell me before I get a shot at him. So I'm probably going to turn and face into the wind most of the time and watch that area, because with the wind blowing my scent, whatever's downwind of me, I've had deer come from a downwind direction, but it's a lot more common they come from upwind. Anyway, but time of day. I used to get up very early in the morning, and I would want to be on my stand, sitting on my milk crate or whatever. I'd want to be in that spot an hour before first light. So the woods around me had an hour to settle down after I got there. And by the time I had first light and first legal shooting light, why, all the squirrels and birds, whatever, had calmed down, and any deer that were moving through the area had moved on and new ones moved in. They didn't know I was there. That's a very sound theory, And after many years of doing that, I can tell you that it doesn't get me any extra deer. Nowadays, I try to show up. I want to be on my stand by dawn, not even first light necessarily. I want to be getting into the woods around the time of first light so I can see what I'm doing, not stumble around in the dark. And if say we've got the very first light in the sky at 6 and we actually get sun up at 6:30, let's say, I probably want to be walking into the woods at 6 and sitting down on my stand at 6:30, right about the time it gets daylight. And that means I could miss some opportunities for deer that are moving around, but let me tell you, I don't see many deer moving around. I have sat on a stand before first light and I've seen coyotes. I've had them walk right up to me in the dark and then they freak out and run away when they smell me or they realize I'm there. I've seen some critters moving around in the dark. I very seldom see a deer or hear a deer, have any sign of a deer that early, and probably not for an hour after first light. Almost all the deer I see moving are from about 7 a.m. Hardly ever see one. If it's first light at 6, I'm not likely to see a deer before 7. And I'm not likely to see a deer after about 10. About 8 to 9 o'clock, at least around here, for whatever reason, is prime time for deer. And so even if I got up a little late and I couldn't be on my stand until 7 or 7:30, it's probably still worth going, because I can probably still get up there, sit down, and give the woods 15-30 minutes to settle down around me before the real prime time for deer shows up. I've killed a bunch of deer between about 8:30 and 9:30 a.m. and very few after about 9:30 a.m. and very few before about 8. Maybe I've killed one at 7:30. But I don't know what it's like in your part of the country. But when it comes to deer hunting, I would say that's when you need to be in the woods. That's the most likely time to see a deer. You can certainly stay on stand all day, but I've done that, and I found that, after about 10 or 11 o'clock, I'm hardly going to see any. In the evening, I've tried sitting on those trails and not gotten great results. Had more luck down hunting across the pasture, actually, in the evening. But even in the evening, don't see a whole lot of deer. Not like I do in the morning. In the morning, their behavior seems to be more predictable. They walk the same trails all the time, and I can almost set my watch by it. I see that first deer, I'm like, oh, it must be about 7:30. Yeah, almost always it is. Sometimes 7, sometimes a little earlier, but I see them about the same time of day all the time and walking the same trails all the time. I just sit very still. If it's a deer I don't want to shoot, I just wait, let it walk past. If it's a deer I do want to shoot, I usually panic and miss. That's my go-to, but every once in a while I do bring one home. I've killed enough to fill the freezer. I mean, we're not starving. We're doing okay. But so yeah, that would be my first tip: is what time of day you hunt. I would say, don't worry about getting to your stand before first light. If you're hunting between about 7 and about 10, those 3 hours are going to be the most productive. If the place where you hunt is anything like the place where I hunt. And after about 10 o'clock, I'll probably stick around till 11, but I'm very unlikely to see a deer during that hour. And then I'll go get some lunch, because I'm usually getting hungry by then. So we talked about where to hunt along a trail. We talked about what time of day to hunt. We talked about controlling scent. Couple more tips I want to talk about. At least 2 more. I'm trying to organize my thoughts. One of them is, what should you use to kill a deer? Well, obviously you can use a rifle, or you can use a shotgun, or use a pistol, or use a bow. I asked my butcher some years ago, I said, what should I use to kill a deer? He said, doesn't matter. Just get them on the ground. And I said, well, surely you have some idea about what spoils more meat than what rifle would spoil more meat than another. Does 243 spoil less meat than 300 Win Mag or whatever? And he said that it didn't matter. He said that he didn't see any difference in spoilage of meat at all, whether you were using archery, muzzleloader, pistol, rifle, shotgun. It didn't matter, except for buckshot. He urged me, he just about made me promise him that I would never kill a deer with buckshot and bring it to him. And I said, well, I got this. I was referring actually to the place right behind me. I said, I got this place where there's a trail and there's real thick brush. And he said, just use slugs. I said, well, I'm afraid that I won't be able to see the whole animal, and there's going to be vegetation, like I'll see a head and a tail, and I'll know where the vitals are. I can kind of see the deer that are moving through. I know it's a safe shot but like I can't really see, I don't have a clear shot of the vital zone, so I'd like to put a load of buckshot out there and increase my chances. And he said, just hunt somewhere else. He absolutely was adamant that I should not bring him any animal I killed with buckshot. He's seen it spoil too much meat. But as far as he was concerned, as long as it was legal, one method was as good as another. One didn't spoil more meat, or, oh, well, the animal, you know, took a long time to die because you didn't hit him with enough gun, so the meat is ruined. No, he wasn't worried about that at all. He was happy with almost any method I used except buckshot. However, he was very adamant about where to shoot a deer. I'm going to come to that a little bit later in the video, because that was his big tip. Something else I want to talk about is what you do if you're hunting in a place that's got some pretty thick brush and a deer won't give you that clear shot. It always seems to be behind some foliage or vegetation, and maybe you've got only a brief window where you can shoot this deer with a clear shot. Let's talk about that. That right there. All right, so what happens to me frequently is I'm sitting in the woods and I've got this clear path. I've got a clear shot between these couple of trees or other pieces of vegetation, and I've got a deer walking along a trail, and I really need to make the shot when he's right here. When I've got this clear shot, there's not a little twig or anything that's going to deflect a bullet or an arrow. But of course, if he's trotting along the trail, he might only be in this window for a fraction of a second. If you're very confident in your shooting ability, you might just take your shot while he's in that window. I like to hedge my bets a little bit. I like to be a little bit safer than that. So if I can see a deer coming along the trail and I know right about the time he steps here, right about here, I need him or would really like him to stop, I'll make a little bit of noise. Usually I'll whistle. Deer are very curious, they're very inquisitive, and almost without fail, no matter what that deer is doing, when he steps here and then he hears that little whistle, he'll stop and turn. And that has put a bunch of deer in my freezer. That's a technique that tends to work very well. Some people will click their tongue, make any kind of little noise that just gets the deer. It doesn't scare him. It's not a scary noise to him, but it's also not a noise he expects to hear. Any kind of little noise that just gets his attention and gets him looking at you. Now, of course, if you're hunting with archery, that's not so good. You don't want him looking at you. But if you've already got your rifle pointed at that spot, or your shotgun or pistol or whatever, and you make that noise and the deer freezes and he gives you that perfect broadside shot and you can see his, you know, heart and lung area, that's an easy shot to make. You've gone from making a moderately difficult shot to making now a very, very easy shot. So that's one of my biggest tips. If you can get that deer to stop in his tracks, then you really increase your chances of putting him in your freezer. I've even known people who take a knife and tap it against a tree root or something like that. Any kind of little noise that gets the deer's attention. It's something he's not expecting to hear, but it's not frightening to him. It's just odd. He'll want to stop and investigate, and when he does, that's the time to shoot him. Okay, just want to follow up. Oh, I drew this terrible picture of a deer and I didn't realize I got it right on this seam, which is perfect because we want to imagine like a line that bisects the deer front to back, and also a line that bisects the deer top to bottom. Yeah, I went to see my butcher years ago. I'd killed a deer and taken it to him, and it suddenly occurred, well, this guy sees hundreds of deer, maybe more than that, every season, and they've been shot with all kinds of different arrows, muzzleloaders, modern rifles, pistols. I thought, what better guy to ask, you know, he's got just this giant pool of data. What rifle or what means of killing the deer is going to spoil the least meat? What would spoil the most? What should I avoid? He said he hated buckshot. No buckshot ever, not under any circumstances. If you want to eat it, don't shoot it with buckshot. That was pretty much his conclusion. But other than that, he was happy with a pistol, an arrow. He said it didn't matter where you shot him was much more important than how. Weight of bullet or whatever. He didn't care. Just get him on the ground. So get him on the ground as quick as you can. Typically, we think of shooting a deer more or less here. Sort of just, well, maybe drawing on that seam wasn't such a good idea. Sort of just behind the shoulder. He was not a big fan of shooting here. So if we have cut the deer in half and we imagine this front half is where we want to shoot him, if we cut the deer in half again, probably right on that line is where most people would say you ought to shoot a deer, and midway between top and bottom. He was not crazy about shots here because that's so close to the shoulder. It's so easy to hit one or both of these shoulders. And those are really good roasts. And he's seen so many of those roasts destroyed. Really good edible meat ruined. He always wanted to see a broadside shot, and he wanted you to stay away from that shoulder. Do not get close to the shoulder because he doesn't want that roast destroyed. But deer have very, very little meat on their ribs. There's very little edible meat there. So shooting them through the ribs is no problem. You're going to waste essentially no meat at all. It would be almost impossible to kill a deer and waste less meat than if you just hit them through the ribs and not the shoulders. So he was happier shooting a deer somewhere in this zone. And in fact, he advocated shooting them about midway back, which to my mind is a little too far back. I have hit them there. They've gone down. Boom. I hit them through the ribs and through the lungs. And that seems like it's too far back, but that worked really, really well. However, I typically try to hit a deer roughly here. I've already done an X. I've done a circle, so I guess I'll do a square. I try to hit them midway between these 2 points, right about there. I'm far away from the roast, from those shoulders. I'm not going to ruin that meat. I'm far enough forward. I'm going to get a good solid lung hit. Sometimes I'll hit a big blood vessel of some kind. I've seen deer hit in this zone, go down within a couple of steps and just bleed like crazy, bright red blood. But for sure, you're going to hit some lungs here. You're going to have some bubbles coming up in the blood, and they don't go very far. You can anchor them quickly when you hit them like this, and you stay away from those shoulders so you're not ruining that meat. If the deer is quartering toward you, you might move this back, or he's quartering away from you. You might move this back a little bit, aim sort of here-ish, because if he's quartering toward you, away from you, remember that bullet is passing through at a weird angle, and it might hit those shoulder roasts. So if you are the kind of person who, I worked with a guy years ago who said that it was his tradition when he killed a deer to go home and eat one of the shoulder roasts that same night. And I said, which one? He said, whichever one isn't blown all to pieces. So obviously he was shooting them what my butcher would say is a little too far forward. If that's you, move back a little bit. You're not going to hurt anything. These aren't African plains animals. You don't have to break the shoulder to anchor the deer. If you hit him back here, if you get him solidly through the lungs, a deer's going to go down. Most hunters are way overgunned for deer anyway. But yeah, stay away from those shoulder roasts. You're going to preserve a lot of good edible meat. If you're not an experienced hunter, if you haven't killed a lot of deer and you haven't experienced that, you don't want to. Preserve those roasts. That's great meat, and there's no reason not to shoot the deer a little bit further back. So those are my 4 tips. Number 1, hunt on a trail. Number 2, hunt during prime time between about 7 and 9 a.m. Number 3, where you shoot the deer, there-ish. Even back here is really not crazy. That's not too far back. But if you're aiming here, you give yourself a little leeway. If you miss a little bit, aim small, miss small, you'll still hit him in a good spot. And also make some noise, make a weird little whistle or a click noise if you want a deer to stop and look at you. All right, guys, as always, sun's out, guns out. Have a great day. Have a great season. Send me some pictures of your deer. I'll see you next time.